Breaking Bad was easily the most iconic TV show to come out of the 21st century, or at least the quarter of it we've lived through so far. Honestly, it's hard to think of another series since The Sopranos ended that's had anything close to that kind of cultural impact. Maybe Game of Thrones, but it was garbage, video pending. In a lot of ways, you could say that Breaking Bad was in conversation with The Sopranos, full of shots or moments that call back to the older show to make a point or build off an established point or just as a tribute to Vince Gilligan's inspiration. But what if I told you there was a series that influenced Breaking Bad even more than The Sopranos? Narrated by a murderer's ghost throughout the late 2000s, Desperate Housewives was an expression of both the enduring love and deep sexual hatred that gay Republican Mark Cherry has for his mother.
He raped you and your mother helped.
Delving into the largely unexplored topic of suburban America hiding a dark secret, Desperate Housewives follows the trials and misadventures of four middle-aged women gossiping and chasing men while they solve mysteries on the idyllic but vaguely sinister Wisteria Lane. Mark Cherry, the show's creator, has this kind of Ryan Murphy thing going on in that he's an undeniably talented showrunner and artist with a gifted cinematic eye, but he also has these contradictory values and hang-ups that come through in his work in a really fascinating way. The show may be trash, but it's beautiful, often rewarding trash. Let me give you an example of what I mean.
Gabrielle was waiting for her next great idea. Her first great idea came when she was 15, after her stepfather paid her a late-night visit. She bought a bus ticket to New York the very next day. Her next occurred 5 years later when she decided to seduce a famous fashion photographer. 1 week later, she began her career as a runway model, which soon led to her next great idea, her decision to marry Carlos Solis. Before she knew it, she had jumped off the runway and moved to the suburbs. Her most recent great idea was born out of her boredom with her new life. That's how she came to start an affair with her teenage gardener.
This scene is absolutely bonkers on so many levels, not the least of which being the juxtaposition of that upbeat, jovial tone against the dark stuff we're seeing. But it's also a very deliberately crafted sequence, which says something about the way this type of abuse can form cycles. First, we have Alejandro coming into Gabby's room with the beer in his hand. Very creepy. Then it jumps to the photographer with the 2 glasses of red wine, which technically Gabby is still too young to be drinking. She's using her sexuality to move forward now to improve her own life, but by framing this man the same way as her stepfather, coming through the door with a drink in his hand, the show is telling us that the first experience is what led her to the second. Then we have Carlos with the champagne, and after that it's John carrying a bottle of water, which I think could represent like youth or sexual virility. And at this point we've seen the full cycle play out. Gabby is the one in a position of power now, taking advantage of a minor. That whole storyline with John Rowland really showcases the conflicting attitudes of the series, because the show is critical of Gabby sleeping with a minor and ultimately portrays this as something destructive that damages everybody involved. But it also spends a lot of time depicting the whole thing as this exciting, sexy affair. And to be honest, the show has a lot of storylines that play this dynamic off as something steamy or funny rather than abusive or, criminal. It's the type of contradiction that's all over Desperate Housewives, the show being the well-intentioned, earnest attempt at empathizing with women made by a misogynist whose closest female relationship was his mother, and with whom he had, by all accounts, an extremely complex history at best. Supposedly, the idea for the series came to him during a conversation with his mother where she admitted to having had fantasies about drowning him in the tub when he was a child.
Where's Mama? Nursing home. How'd she get there? Don't know.
And I'm not even gonna get into the final season, where the most direct stand-in for Cherry's mother crashes out and goes on a fuck rampage, running through every dick in town like Hog is about to be discontinued. Desperate Housewives' mixture of progressive ideals and waspish social conservatism makes for a fascinating combination I could bloviate about all day, but we're here to talk about a specific topic.
Ever since I met you, everything I have ever cared about is gone. Ruined, turned to shit. Dead ever since I hooked up with the great Heisenberg.
Take your stinking deal and shove it.
Edie.
Every time something bad happens to me, you're standing nearby. Well, I've had it. No more pretending to be friends. When I get out of here, I'm gonna destroy you.
If the cops catch me, I give them what they want the most. You.
Now, Desperate Housewives is probably not the first show you'd think of as having influenced something like Breaking Bad. They're about very different things, they're structured differently, written differently, and most of all, Desperate Housewives is not really considered to be part of what we could call the canon of prestige television. But in the same way a good writer won't just read within their own genre, filmmakers draw from a wide range of influences in developing their cinematic voice. And I think I can make a pretty decent case for this being Vince Gilligan's go-to binge while he wrote Breaking Bad. In particular, there are 3 scenes I want to take a look at. Well, 2 or 3 scenes. Maybe 4. Possibly 5, depending on how you count certain things. So, one of the many subplots in Desperate Housewives about people in their 30s and 40s porking teenagers comes right after the time skip between the 4th and 5th seasons. The series jumps ahead by 5 years, and the Scavo children are recast as older teenagers, and at a certain point it's revealed that one of the twins, Porter I think, has been sleeping with his friend's mother. And between getting catfished by his own mom and that spanking Bree gave him back in the first season, it's no wonder the poor little bastard developed a thing for older women. Anyway, the woman he's sleeping with is also being abused by her husband, whose nightclub gets burned down around the same time Lynette and Tom find out about the affair. And a lot of people think Porter did it, since he and his brother burned down this other restaurant when they were little boys, because the Italian chef was trying to throw sausage into their mom and drive the family's pizza place out of business. This show is so Oedipal, man.
Isn't that bizarre? That's the sound my mom makes when she climaxes.
Anyway, Porter didn't set this fire, but the guy he was cuckolding thinks he did, and his wife also disappears because Lynette cleaned out the family's savings account and bribed her to go away and never contact them again. Which, by the way, is very similar to what happens in the 4th season of Breaking Bad when Skyler gives their money to Ted to make the problem with the IRS go away. So Porter gets arrested on suspicion of arson, and because Lynette gave all their cash to their son's rapist, she and Tom have to put their restaurant up for bail. On top of which, this guy threatens to kill Porter for fucking his wife and burning his club down, which obviously scares the shit out of the kid, so he switches places with his twin brother and blows town. Tom and Lynette figure this out pretty quickly, and they're trying to convince Porter to come home before his court date, both so he doesn't go to prison when the police eventually find him, and because they'll lose their restaurant if he jumps bail. They eventually figure out that Lynette's mother has him stashed away somewhere, but she won't tell them where because she's like a terrible person who's trying to use the situation to get back at Lynette for putting her in a nursing home. So what Lynette does is stage a car crash and pretend she was admitted to the hospital, knowing that her mother would come running and bring Porter with her. And this is exactly how Walt tricks Hank in the 3rd season of Breaking Bad when he and Jesse are trapped in the RV. He has Saul pretend Marie got into an accident and that she might be dying in the hospital. As an aside, one of the more impressive pieces of character writing on the show was how organically Lynette reflected some of her mother's personality traits and how well it's conveyed, even though Stella only really appears in a handful of episodes. It's pretty much inevitable that all of us, no matter how much we might try to resist it, are going to internalize and reflect certain elements of the people who raised us during our formative years. And if you had an abusive parent, especially one whose presence in your life was very large, you can make it your mission not to become like them, as Lynette does, and still wind up mirroring their personality or behavior in ways you never would have expected, because for you it manifests in a different form. There's an episode where Stella drugs Lynette with pot-laced brownies to help her deal with the effects of chemotherapy, and the way she slips her the brownie through Penny to make sure she ate it, I remember thinking, what a Lynette move. And we see it paralleled in another scene where Lynette does almost the same thing to Tom. He's prescribed medical marijuana to deal with his depression, which Lynette decides is bullshit, so she replaces his weed with oregano. There really isn't a meaningful difference between replacing a person's doctor-prescribed medication with something else and slipping a drug into their food or drink without telling them. You take Jesse's aborted plan to poison Gus in Breaking Bad juxtaposed against Nacho swapping out Hector's meds with placebos in Better Call Saul. It's basically the same thing. Now, in this case, it's just marijuana, so probably not as serious as what you might think of when you hear that somebody was drugged, but the through line here is that both of these women are willing to override another person's autonomy regarding what substances go into their body. When Lynette confronts Stella about it, she's completely unapologetic and basically says that any mother would do what they had to prevent their child from suffering. And you know who's the kind of person to ignore the wishes of her loved ones and impose her will on them if she thinks she knows better? Lynette Scavo.
My mom used to beat the hell out of my sisters and me, and I won't do it. I will not become my mother.
I made this kind of a shit post on the Desperate Housewives subreddit last week where I posted a screen cap of the Scavo boys going apeshit. And I captioned it something like, I really admire Lynette's restraint in not literally beating her children to death. The post wound up being taken down, which is fine, I kind of expected that. My humor is more the oddball shot of tequila than everyone's cup of tea, but you all knew that. What bothered me, kind of a lot actually, were the comments I saw arguing that Lynette actually should have hit her children. Not literally beat them to death, the title was obviously an exaggeration, but like justifying Bree spanking one of them without her permission, or implying that Lynette should have done so herself. Equating physical violence with discipline. Hitting a child does not instill them with discipline. Teaching children discipline means not losing your shit in front of them and making sure they eat their veggies and brush their teeth and do their chores every day. When adults hit children, it's because they themselves lack discipline or self-control. And that's the thing, Lynette is a violent person who is often not in control of herself. She punches Tom in the face in the first episode, then sends him over a chair when he tells her he has another kid. She almost threw Kayla's mother a beatdown too, and slapped the shit out of the woman who was statutorily raping Porter. And yeah, that one's fair, but she was ready to fight Macy Gibbons in the first season just for talking shit.
Let's take it outside.
Let's take what outside?
Your sorry ass we're throwing down.
You are crazy.
Just being practical. Isn't it better to settle this once and for all rather than endure all this alpha mom crap until our kids graduate? Come on. I'll even let you take the first shot.
Well, you'll have one shot. You better make it good. What, are you waiting for your girlfriends? You better go. You better go. Take it. Take your shot.
Going back to cycles of abuse, it's pretty obvious that Lynette learned this behavior from her mother, and while she herself is not a perfect parent, and while she and Tom fail utterly to instill even the slightest bit of discipline in their children, one of the really good things that she does is not pass this violent behavior down to her kids by hitting them the way she was hit. It'd be nice to say she doesn't hit any children, but let's just focus for now on how she treats her own. And it's not just better for her kids that she never beat them, it's better for the world at large. It's not good that Lynette is a violent person. Grown adults cannot be hitting people. And if she were a man, it would be even worse. Which I don't say to imply that it's less wrong when women hit people, or that women hitting their male partners is cute or quirky. It isn't, and it isn't acceptable. But factually, a man can do more damage in those few seconds they're not in control of themselves than a woman could. A man could beat somebody to death in a few seconds. And you look at the kind of people Lynette's sons in particular grow into. The older boys are rambunctious, uncontrollable, and have absolutely no respect for the law or social convention. They've both been arrested, and Porter apparently spent time in juvie during the time skip. He also definitely masturbated to that Sarah J alias before finding out it was Lynette, so there's already at least one psychological time bomb ticking away in that crazy little head of his. If boys like that are taught to be violent, and in particular if they're taught to associate anger and humiliation with women, like if their mother beat them, for example, that could be really, really bad. When people talk about cutting off the cycle of abuse, it's not just about sparing their own children from experiencing what they did, it's about interrupting a pattern that would ultimately see their children/victims go on to abuse others. John Rowland isn't a regular part of the cast after that first season, but whenever he does show up, it's always made clear the degree to which the affair with Gabby has affected the rest of his life. He lets a bunch of older people take advantage of him, just like she did. He marries for money, just like she did. He cheats on his partner, just like she did. And eventually he even starts sniffing around one of his underage employees, just like she did. Check this out, by the way. The second or third time John pops back up, Carlos and Gabby are going through a divorce and she runs into him at like a party or something. She's impressed with how much older and more mature he seems, and they hook up before she finds out that he's engaged and his future father-in-law is basically financing his new lifestyle. Around this same time, Carlos moves back into the house, more or less the same way Walt did in Breaking Bad. Gabby calls the cops, just like Skyler did, and when that backfires on her, she throws sleeping with John again in his face.
No, if I wanted to hurt you, I would tell you about last weekend, when I slept with John Rowland.
I fucked Ted.
Speaking of Skyler, this I actually do think is just a coincidence, but you notice how Lynette is married to a blonde himbo all the fans hate because of how annoying he is? But when you compare him against the other people on the lane, he's one of the only ones who isn't a cheater or an abuser or like a murderer or a human trafficker or something.
Wait for what? What are you waiting for?
For the cancer to come back.
I think Lynette is fantastic. She is a great manager. She's got terrific people skills and is very reliable. As long as the cancer doesn't flare up again.
Before the final season came out, the most praised and talked about episode of Breaking Bad was Fly from season 3. It's about Walt having a nervous breakdown brought on by insomnia, stress, and guilt over his role in the air disaster at the end of season 2. He becomes hyper-fixated on a fly that's loose in the lab and refuses to let Jesse do any work until they remove the contaminant. And as they go, it becomes clear the fly represents Walt's fear and anxiety over all the elements in his life he can't control, as well as the nagging guilt he can't unburden himself from. He fixates on the fly because it's a tangible thing that is actually, in theory, within his control. A problem he really can address, even if he can't address the thing that's really bothering him.
Jesse, I know this seems unusual to you, a layman. A fly, I get it, seems insignificant, right? But trust me, in a highly controlled environment such as this, any pollutant, no matter how small, could completely
Jesse slips Walt a tranquilizer, so he's getting more and more delirious and eventually just breaks down and tells Jesse how sorry he is about Jane. Jesse isn't really paying attention and just takes it as a general expression of sympathy. Then he kills the fly right as Walt passes out and tucks him off in some side room to sleep while he finishes their cook. Something about this scene when he wakes up, and the whole episode in general, made me think of that episode of The Sopranos where Tony kills Ralph and then Christopher has to come help him clean up. Especially that part at the end where he wakes up at the Bing and he's feeling all trippy, stepping back out into the daylight. But what if I told you there was another show that was even more influential on this whole sequence? Can you guess what it is? Can you? I mean, you can, right? At the end of Desperate Housewives' 3rd season, the Scavos are fighting over a low-key emotional affair Lynette had with one of the cooks at their restaurant. Things culminate when they're in bed together and Lynette is actively trying to hurt Tom and maybe even re-injure his back. Tom throws her off of him and she hits her head on the nightstand, and when they go to the hospital to get her checked out, the tests reveal that she has cancer, which is the focus of her story for the first third or so of the next season. Eventually she goes into remission, and in the same episode where she's declared cancer-free, Lynette gets into this Elmer Fudd Bugs Bunny style fight with a possum that's been screwing around in their yard.
This is not a joke, Tom. Something has attacked our home, and when that happens, you don't just stand by, you fight it. Screw this creature that has come into our lives, uninvited, and is trying to destroy us. It will not defeat me.
As the episode plays out, it becomes clear that the possum is a lot more to Lynette than some yard pest. Like Walt's fly, it represents an outlet for everything in her life that's spun out of control. Something that, unlike cancer, can be physically confronted and fought. Which I think dawns on her just after she finally manages to kill the thing, because she breaks down in tears and starts saying that she's sorry, the emotional release coinciding with the death of the pest, just like in Breaking Bad. Not convinced Gilligan pulled from this episode? Well, remember that little story Jesse tells Walt about the reaction his aunt had when her cancer became more advanced?
Possum. Big, freaky looking bitch. Hey, since when did they change it to opossum? What's up with that? I mean, when I was coming up, it was just possum.
Desperate Housewives was a fascinating, offensive, ignorant, artful, trashy, beautiful, frankly racist mess. It's not as good as Breaking Bad, not even in the same league, but without Desperate Housewives, some of the most iconic scenes and moments in Breaking Bad might look very different. It might be a whole other show, and who knows if it would be as good. There is another widely acclaimed series which also stood on the hips of giants, but honestly, I just don't think you're ready to hear about that one yet. Besides, I really need to finish up this Sopranos video.